Hello and welcome, and in today's video I'm going to share with you the 10 best ASA Tames that you need right now. So let's get into it. In at number 10 is the Raptor, and this was first showcased in an image in a community post for ASA. And in ASA, this is a creature which you'll find no struggle with taming, as the Dino AI is improved now, so putting a creature into a built trap can be somewhat of a challenge. But luckily you can bowler up the Raptor, so it is a pretty easy tame. You just bowler it and throw some tranks into it. Or if you wanted to, you can always go the route of the baby dino, where you need to kill the two parents, and then you can just insta-tame that baby dino, and they'll raise really quickly. That is definitely an insane feature, which I think at some point Wildcard is going to have to nerf, because it is way too OP, and I don't know if all creatures out there do have baby forms, but if there were like baby Gigas, that would be a little bit on the OP side, as it is significantly easier to kill a Giga than it is to tame one. So if you just had to kill a Giga to then just get yourself a tamed Giga, that would be absolutely insane. Next up, we have the Uti, or Uterus, or Furry T-Rex. And for this one, you will notice for the first half of the B-roll, my view distance was set to medium, so its face is a little bit deformed. If you are thinking of larger creatures and recording B-roll in ASA, you'll probably want to turn that view distance up to high, as view distance does work very differently in this game to ASE. In terms of the UT's use though, this thing is by far the best creature out there for doing any kind of bosses, and you may not be concerned with bosses yet because it's still very early into ASA, and I know loads of people are taking their time with ASA, and I'm definitely one of those people as well. But when you do need to do that boss, these things are going to be insanely crucial in actually defeating that boss. And if you want a few creatures in terms of killing bosses, tame yourself a UT, tame yourself a Daedon. For the Broodmother, use Megatheriums. For the Dragon, use Theres. And for the Megatherium, you can just use Rexes, Spinos, any form of larger carnivore. But the UT essentially is going to do the buffing of those creatures to make your creatures which are fighting that boss just even better, which is something definitely to look forward to. And just before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe, as it really does help me out. Now, the Baryonyx has always been a favourite creature of mine. In terms of the Barry's use though, this is by far the best creature out there for caving, and it is the best creature out there for caving in ASA, as you have literally no other options like the Shadowmane, which you'll find on Gen 2. But apart from caving, the Baryonyx is an extremely useful creature as well for just killing things in the map. The Baryonyx is actually an extremely versatile tame, which can kill things up to Rexes and Gigas pretty easily, as long as obviously you have a high level. You can't get away with a level 5 Baryonyx absolutely decimating through Gigas, but it did a pretty good job at killing this Rex, and this Rex was a high level. I think it was a 135 or something like that, and this Barry is about a level 80. Either way, it does deal a lot of damage, and compared to some larger carnivores, it has a significantly higher amount of mobility, which is something which is extremely useful again, because the Rex is very rubbish when it comes to its turning circle. Now, the Ther, or the Tickle Chicken, or Freddy Krueger, is an extremely good tame, and I've mentioned it before in being extremely useful for killing the dragon. And the reason for that is its fire ability does a significantly unfair amount of damage to carnivores, but it doesn't to herbivores, and the Therizino packs an immense amount of damage when it comes to being a herbivore. And it can also harvest dead bodies as well, which many other herbivores can't do. It's great at harvesting wood, it can harvest fiber really well, it can harvest berries really well, but you are going to need to level up that weight if you're using this thing for a lot of wood gathering. And in terms of that ability there, which we looked at in terms of its gathering fiber, that's why it's called the Tickle Chicken, because it kind of does a tickly movement with its fingers. In terms of its other uses though, this thing is also an extremely great travel mount, and it will get you everywhere in the Ark map with absolute ease. It deals an immense amount of damage to things, it travels pretty quickly, and you will not feel unsafe on this thing at all. This is actually one of the safest creatures you will find out there, and one at some point which is definitely worth the tame if you can get it into a track quite easily, as Dino AI now is significantly improved. Now, it seems a little unfair to put the Stego above the Ther, but it is an extremely useful thing to have, and in my opinion, it does deserve to be above the Ther, as especially at this stage in your ASA progress, you're probably going to be more looking towards taming a Stego than a Ther. Either way, in terms of the Stego's use, this is a great berry gatherer, of course, but it's great at gathering wood as well, and it's great at sticking up a fight. And if you're on a PvP server, now that servers are somewhat kind of fixed in ASA, these things are actually the best creature out there for doing any kind of turret soaking. And they have rider protection as well, which I'm pretty sure only the Megachelon has as well, if the Megachelon even has that. And the Megachelon isn't on ASA at the moment because that is a Gen 1 creature. But you're definitely going to want to level up the stamina on this thing, as its stamina is pretty poor, to say the least. But it is very, very useful, and for the things you're going to be using it for, it's not really going to be a creature which you're going to travel across the whole map with. And if you are, then be prepared to be significantly more annoyed at Arc when you finished than when you started. But either way, that is an insane commitment. And it also does deal the bleed ability when it can grapple onto a creature with its tail. But for some reason, I couldn't do that properly, even though I did use the other attack. But its normal attack does do a significant amount of damage, and the Stego definitely deals a very reasonable amount of damage. In at number 5 is the Thyla, and there is a lot to say about the Thyla. This is a really, really useful tame spawning in the Redwoods biome, which can be a bit of annoyance, and especially considering how much foliage is in the Redwoods biome now, this thing is even more dangerous than it was in ASE, as it is so hard to actually spot one of these things, especially with all the fog and the volumetrics. These things are significantly more dangerous now. And thanks to ASA being a bit buggy, their wall climbing abilities aren't as good as they used to be, but I'm sure that'll be fully fixed at some point. In terms of their uses though, these are really, really great carnivores, dealing that all famous bleed ability, and they are great travel mounts as well. These things have immense speed, they can jump, they can climb walls, if the wall actually kind of lets you climb it. The walls at the moment are pretty rubbish, and with the floating rocks, you know, this is the ASA graphics we really needed, right? All of the bugginess, but when it does work, is an extremely useful ability. And again, it can travel really fast, it's really efficient at traveling across the map, and the fact that it can deal loads of damage, that is really nice for a travel mount to have, as many other travel mounts which are very effective, like you could say the Gallimimus, if you're even gonna bother to tame that thing. Those things don't pack a punch at all when it comes to damage, and it is really useful when they can, because many of Arc's creatures do want to kill you. That is the thing that Arc creatures want to do. And also, it can climb redwood trees as well. It can pretty much climb anything. Right, now we have the Rex. And if you've only played ASA and you've never played ASE, then the Rex is probably going to be a creature which you're really going to look up on. And pretty much every Arc creature at some point does want to tame a Rex. A Rex is such a cool creature, capable of so much damage, and you even get an achievement for riding it as well. And it is really, really great at killing alphas. If you don't know what alphas are yet, they're essentially buffed version of creatures which you can get pretty good loot and XP out of. Don't try taming one though, as alphas are sadly untamable. But to be honest, that would make the game a little too OP in my opinion. If you could tame like Alpha Carnos and Alpha Rexes, that might be a step too far. In terms of the Rex's abilities though, it doesn't really have an ability, but in terms of its use cases, is how I should have worded it, this is by far the best boss creature out there. Unless you're doing the dragon boss fight, use those for that, do not use Rexes. It will either you will be able to win the boss, which is actually quite rare on Rexes unless you've got good Rexes, or you'll just lose it and lose everything. Just use Theres, please, please, please. But in terms of everything else, it is absolutely amazing at doing it. Megatheriums are better on the Broodmother because they have another buff, which is great against insects. But the Rex is just such a balanced carnivore that it is one of the best creatures that you can find out there for dealing that damage to all of those creatures, and also while staying alive, because its health isn't so abysmal like some other larger carnivores that it can actually keep up a fight. But it doesn't matter too much on the island, as the boss fights rarely even last more than 5 minutes if you do have some good Rexes. But I can see why the Overseer would last significantly longer. In at number 3 is the RG, and the RG was shown in the ASA trailer, and what an insane creature this is for so many things in Ark. And I'm slightly unsure about the camera on this thing. I'm not really for the camera, like it's offside a little bit. Wildcard, bring back the old RG camera, but it still doesn't make it any less useful. This is by far the best creature out there when the game actually decides to run properly, to gather all kinds of metal and things like that. Obviously it can't gather the metal, but it has the weight to facilitate you actually gathering all of it. And if you get a good level, you have yourself some insane weight, and with obviously the weight reduction it has on metal, crystal and obsidian, and I think other resources as well, you'll have a blast of a time on it. And it does have a couple of nice cool abilities to go along with it too. Firstly, if it does kill a creature, this thing will regen insanely quickly, and you'll have that regen buff, and that's how you know that ability is working. And you'll see that on wild RGs as well, so watch out. And especially if you are killing something near a mountain, and then once its dead body is kind of spawned in, because it's a separate kind of entity, the RGs will literally summon onto it. It's insane how quickly RGs will feast on a dead carcass if you've just killed something in like 2 seconds. RGs, and that can absolutely ruin your day. In at number 2 is the Giga, and the Giga right now is pretty much the best creature you can get in ASA, and it's definitely one which you should tame at some point, partly just because I have nostalgia reasons. But the Giga is actually a very valuable tame for going around the map and absolutely destroying all kinds of creatures. The Giga deals so much damage, and it can absolutely tear through so many creatures, although you really should not be chuffed about its stamina stat. Its stamina is by far one of the worst stats you can find in Ark. Don't bother leveling up, and also if you do level up their melee levels up really slowly, so on the Giga it is pretty much useless to level up anything. You should really just go for those breeding mutations, as the Gigas level up so slowly. But you can always put those levels into damage if you have them, because you might as well. The Giga will just be dealing more damage. In at number 1 is the Carnotaurus, and some people may absolutely hate me for putting this thing in number 1, but there seems to be so many Carnos on ASA. Is there like an overspawn or something? There's like 6 right next to my base, and these are really great creatures which I think you should tame at some point. Definitely a creature worth taming. They are absolutely everywhere. They're really easy to tame, and their saddle is unlocked in the kind of mid-game stages. I think it's in the 50s, it might be in the 40s, and its saddle isn't very expensive as well. The Carnotaurus is an amazing creature, capable of so much more damage than a Raptor. I think it's faster than a Raptor as well. It seems faster, and it is so much more powerful than a Raptor. It has decent weight, unlike a Raptor, which is a really good thing to have, and it does have the bleed ability as well. It is capable of dealing so much damage to creatures, and it has a really nice health stat, a really decent stamina stat, decent speed, decent weight, insane damage, and with that bleed ability it deals even more. The Carnotaurus is definitely an insane creature, which although does not have the pack buff, would actually be pretty great for bosses as well, but maybe just on Gamma. I probably wouldn't bring these things into alpha fights, but they're just really great tames. Tame yourself a Carno. In my opinion, they're just so abundant, and they're so easy to tame, and they're just so good. It is 100% worth your time at some point to tame yourself a Carno. But anyway, that is the end of today's video, and I want to know, what 10 creatures are you excited for, or do you really like in ASA so far? And I'll see you all later.